This respect doesn't begin with insults. It doesn't start with raised voices or sarcasm or open hostility. It begins with a decision. A quiet one. A decision most people never even notice is being made. They only notice the result. The tone shifts, the restraint disappears, and suddenly, you're being treated differently. What confuses most people is that disrespect often feels sudden. Like a switch was flipped, like it came out of nowhere. But it didn't. There's a precise moment people decide they can disrespect you, and that moment is almost never where you think it is. Most of us believe respect is emotional, that it comes from admiration, from liking someone, from a shared set of moral values. But in the real world, in our social lives, respect is far more mechanical. It's a calculation, a quiet internal evaluation of just two things: cost and uncertainty. Cost is the part of the brain that asks, what happens if I cross this person? It's the potential for fallout, for consequences, for a negative reaction. And uncertainty is the part that asks, am I sure what will happen? It's the unpredictability, the element of the unknown and how you might respond. When both cost and uncertainty are present, respect holds. The social contract is honored. But the moment one of them disappears, the moment someone concludes the cost of crossing you is low, or they become certain your reaction will be manageable, their behavior changes. It's not because they've suddenly become cruel. It's because in their calculation, restraint no longer feels necessary.
It never starts with a shout. The moment respect begins to crumble, it's almost always a whisper. It's so small, so quiet, you feel ridiculous for even noticing. Think about it. That time you were mid-sentence and someone just started talking over you. Or that little joke that felt less like a joke and more like a jab. A last-minute request that completely ignores your schedule. A subtle step into your personal space. You clock it. You feel it. But you say nothing. Because what are you going to do? Start an argument over an interruption? It feels petty, unreasonable. So you let it go. And that choice feels logical. But inside, something shifts. A quiet entry is made in a ledger, not an emotional one, a strategic one. A single data point is recorded. This boundary was just moved, and nothing happened. And here's the part everyone gets wrong. After that line moves, the other person doesn't immediately leap over it. They don't suddenly become openly disrespectful. They wait. They have to, because blatant disrespect is risky. It exposes their true intent. It's like testing a quiet electric fence. You don't grab it with both hands. You give it a light tap. So they look for confirmation. They test the line again. Another small push, another casual overstep, maybe phrased as a harmless favor. And they watch. They listen for the hum of the current. But there's just silence. Still nothing from you. And in that silence, slowly, a dangerous thing happens. Their curiosity about where the line is hardens into the certainty that there isn't one at all.
Have you ever felt a dynamic shift on a dime? In a friendship? At work? One day things are one way, and the next, the tone is different. Their patience is shorter. It feels like a switch was flipped, like it came from nowhere. But it didn't. There's a moment that happens, completely unseen by the outside world, where testing stops. An internal verdict is reached. It's the quiet moment the question inside someone's head changes. It stops being, can I do this? And it becomes a statement. I can do this. That's the verdict. And once it forms, behavior changes. Not aggressively, not dramatically, casually. Because the real fight, the mental cost of the decision, has already been paid. The war was won in silence, long before you saw the first skirmish. This is exactly why disrespect feels so sudden. We aren't watching the internal trial. We're only watching the behavior that follows the verdict. You weren't watching the decision being made. You were watching the aftermath. That verdict might not even be about a task. It could be about you. The moment someone internally decides they no longer need your approval, or that they've outgrown the dynamic you both share, respect doesn't just vanish, it gets reclassified. So when their patience finally drops, when the pressure they put on you increases, when their tone shifts just enough to make you feel off balance, it feels abrupt because you missed the most important part. You saw the action, but you never saw the decision. That conclusion, the one that is now changing everything between you, was reached long before.
We often think of calm as a superpower, the ability to stay composed when everything is chaotic. And it is powerful, but it has a hidden vulnerability. A calm demeanor without clear, visible boundaries isn't just calm, it's ambiguous. And ambiguity is an invitation for others to fill in the blanks, to reach their own conclusions about what your quiet really means. They don't see your composure as confidence, they misread it as tolerance. Your silence stops looking like maturity and starts looking like permission. And once someone believes they have permission, the entire dynamic shifts. The perceived risk of disrespect drops to zero. It suddenly feels safe for them to cross a line because your silence has unknowingly told them that no line exists. This is where so many of us get stuck. We tolerate it, we stay calm, we let it slide, until we can't anymore. And we try to push back later after the pattern is set, after the behavior has become normal. But by then, the other person has already reached a verdict about you. In their mind, the case is closed. They know who you are and what you'll put up with. So when you finally resist, it doesn't land as a moment of restored respect. It lands as a shock. It feels inconsistent. And that inconsistency doesn't trigger self-reflection on their part. It triggers irritation. They get annoyed. Not because you're wrong to set a boundary, but because you're challenging a belief they've already cemented about you. You're changing the rules to a game they didn't even know you were playing. And that's the brutal lesson here. Addressing something early is cheap. It costs a moment of discomfort. But addressing it late, that's expensive. It costs trust, it costs energy, and it costs a piece of the respect you were trying to get back in the first place.
Every interaction has two moments. The first is the cheat moment. It's when a boundary is first tested. An interruption, a dismissive tone. Something feels slightly off, but it's still easy to address. At this stage, correction costs almost nothing. A look, a pause, a calm reassertion. There's no tension, no damage, because the pattern hasn't formed yet. But most people miss the cheat moment. They tell themselves it's insignificant, that reacting would be petty, that silence is easier. And that's when the second moment arrives, the expensive moment. This is when the same behavior has repeated so often it feels normal. The other person is no longer testing, they're acting. Now, any resistance feels like a confrontation, not because the boundary is unreasonable, but because it's being enforced late. And you are forced to fight the expensive moment without realizing you created it. Because respect is easiest to preserve before it's questioned.
Here's a thought you can't unhear. People don't disrespect you because they're bold. They disrespect you when they believe it's safe. And that belief isn't formed in an instant. It's built quietly, through small moments. A missed signal that goes unchecked. A boundary that isn't enforced. It's a silent negotiation happening right under the surface. By the time the words finally change, by the time the disrespect becomes obvious, the decision is already old. The judgment has been made. Recognize that turning point early, and most problems never even begin to escalate. But if you miss it, everything that comes after feels so much harder than it ever needed to be. If you want to understand how respect is built, lost, and quietly negotiated, stay here. These patterns always reveal themselves early.